Okay. Hi, so today we're going to be presenting our presentation for homework 4. I'm Dayanara.
I'm Marco Montanez,
And I'm Arion Arias.
and our research paper was titled Redox-Driven Mineral and Organic Associations in the Jezero Crater of Mars, published in 10th of September 2025, so fairly recent. And this is the main objective was the goal of this mission is to collect rock samples from the selected suite of um, Martian rocks during the investigation of the Jezero Crater landing site and its surroundings. So, as you see in the map, this was the trajectory they had um, that the Mars rover, the 2020 Perseverance rover, took, and it collected samples. Essentially, was collecting samples to take back home, take back to Earth from the Jezero Crater. The big names to remember are really just Bright Angel and the Masonic Temple. This is where um, the samples were taken. The Bright Angel Formation, sedimentology, and provenance. Mudstones are deposited from the suspension and energetic currents. So the rover collects these mudstones as they're classified, and they contain chemically weathered and oxidized, or such as enriched in silicon, aluminum, positive iron, with a positive charge, and magnesium and manganese. And they were in contrast with Western fan sediments and local variations in gray size across Neretva Vallis, which indicated temporal variation in current velocities, and depositional processes included weathering, erosion, fallout from suspension, debris follow, and this forms mudstones and conglomerates.
So iron phosphate nodules, they're known as poppy seeds. They are found in sizes that vary from 100 to 200 micrometers. They're usually black to dark blue and green in the daylight, and then they become white LED at night. They're enriched in iron, phosphorus, zinc, and then the iron to phosphorus ratio is 3 to 2, so not that big of a difference. The minerals include iron phosphate, phosphoferrite, metavivinite, ferroschonzite, and sadabrite, all found on the periodic table. And then their distribution is not laminated, which means that they're lively formed after deposition. In some nodules, in some locations, nodules are encased in larger calcium sulfate nodules. This just means that the iron phosphate nodules are formed first. And then the next slide, Marco created a drawing.
Since the mud-faced stones really just have a greenish tint, iron phosphate minerals are green for this example, and they're encased in a calcium sulfate layer, a shell, I mean, um, as a part of the greater mudstone layer, and it's just a repeating layers of this for 100 to 200 micrometers. So very small, but the rover was able to pick up on this. I'll pass it on to, yeah.
Okay, so now we'll be talking about the reaction fronts, which are considered leopard spots because they look and are in size of leopard spots. They're circular spots running from 200 micrometers to 1 millimeter in size, with the darker rim surrounding the lighter colored core. The rims contain iron phosphate. Again, it's just iron and phosphate for the core, for the rim, and then the core is enriched in sulfur, iron, nickel, and zinc, forming sulfide minerals such as greigite. And then their adjacent phases are red-brown, which is iron-rich phase, consistent with the siderite. And then their irregular shapes indicate chemical reactions, not that they're deposing them. So yeah, and then in the corner I have a drawing of the leopard spots. So in the middle you can see that I drew the core that consists of iron sulfate, and then on the outside you can see that it's iron and phosphate. And then I just, for comparison, drew an arrow with the sizing to show how tiny they are.
All right, great.
And then for the next slide, we're going to be talking about mudstone redox and color changes. So we can just basically tell a lot of things based on the color of the mud. Mudstone color tells us about how oxidized the iron is. The redder the mud, the more oxidized the mud is, and then the less red, it means it's less oxidized. Areas with more iron phosphate and iron sulfide minerals are less red, showing less oxidation. Some examples that are mentioned in the reading and just in general is the Apollo Temple, which has a lots of iron phosphate and iron sulfide. It's a little bit less red, but it's the strongest organic signal. Next, we have the Malgoza crest. It has a little bit of iron minerals. It's most red, and then there's no iron organic matter detected. And then lastly, we have the Walhalla Glades and Chayava Falls. These are pretty consistent levels. They stay consistent, which means that it's kind of hard to tell how oxidized it is because it has a lot of iron, but also a lot of phosphate and sulfide. And then in the right corner, I have an image just kind of showing the two different kind of mudstones. The more red being high in iron phosphate and sulfate minerals, and then the darker red would be the more oxidized levels. And then the formation of iron and sulfur minerals formed after the mudstone was deposited. Phosphate was originally attached to sediment grades. Later, iron and phosphate were reorganized into iron phosphate nodules. Some conditions, they're low in oxygen and moderate pH allowed iron and phosphate to move and form minerals like vivianite, which we just talked about. Organic matter helped this process by reducing iron, turning it from oxidized to a form that could combine with phosphate or sulfur. Iron sulfide minerals likely formed where organic matter called sulfate reduction. And just kind of a fun fact, not all areas have these minerals. The formation depends on the sediment type and just the local chemistry of the environment there. And then something this tells us about Mars, the presence of iron phosphate and iron sulfide minerals shows that chemical reactions changed the mudstone after it was formed. These reactions involved water, organic matter, and changing oxygen levels. Organic matter may have helped create these minerals through natural chemical reactions, even without life. Different sediment types are influenced where minerals are formed. And then overall, the Bright Angel Rocks records a complex history of water-related and chemical activity, giving clues about the past environment on Mars, and could probably also help future experiments and discoveries about Mars.
To summarize what was just said, there was an investigation on how iron and sulfur minerals formed in the Bright Angel Formation inside the Jezero Crater may have signs of life because in order for iron to oxidize, water would have needed to be present. With the info, they checked the minerals formed abiotically or within a biological process. Using these features of minerals, the study finds whether or not these are potential biosignatures of past microbial activity on Mars. So,
Right, so now we have to the instruments or tools used to be able to actually record the data. So to begin, we have the pixel, and it's basically used for measuring elemental composition and the minerals that were found. Next, we have the Sherlock, and this was used to scan and detect organic molecules and mineral bonds within an item. Then we go to the Watson camera. So basically, they just take a super close-up photo, and from that photo taken, you can basically see the texture and contents of whatever they're imaging. So basically, the different minerals. Next, we have the SuperCam, and this would just do a sensing of the minerals and the visual geology. Lastly, we have the RimFax, and it would be used as a radar that goes into the ground and shows the subsurface layering. And for the preparation, basically just they got the little rocks and they drilled into them just to get the fresh surface. And then since there was dust from the drilling, the dust was taken off using just a specific gas dust removal tool just to make sure that the images were clear. Okay, so now on to our evidence from the Bright Angel Formation. So basically, there were two minerals found. These minerals were iron phosphate and iron sulfide. The extra zinc inside the nodules suggests that repeated iron sulfur reactions did actually occur. And with the Raman test, there were signs of carbon-based material So there was signs of life. The rock patterns and halo-like patterns were made by microbes on Earth. These minerals formed in a cool, watery environment, and it was not super hot.
Okay.
All right. So for the null hypothesis, we have the iron and sulfur minerals that were formed without life. So that was basically the null hypothesis, and they found that the magnetic degassing of sulfur gas created the dissolved sulfide. The abiotic sulfate reduction was due to the organic matter that was found, and lastly, the reductive dissolution of iron was by the sulfide. So some difficulties that were found within the study were that the surface was in between 150 and 200 degrees Celsius, and they found that the rocks weren't buried deep enough. Basically, this just means that the abiotic process wasn't able to completely explain how the mineral textures actually got there, based on what they found. And the biological pathway hypothesis is just that microbes can help form minerals by using iron and sulfide in their metabolism. The iron reduction by the microbes produced the iron phosphate. The sulfide reduction produces the iron sulfide. This explanation is why we see the phosphorus sulfur minerals and signs of the organic carbon working together. The patterns are similar to spots on Earth that we can see, and that's why they mentioned that it can be linked to actual life. If the microbes weren't involved, these rocks formed in gentle, they were formed in gentle, like surroundings and life-friendly conditions, and not extreme ones. So that's why we mentioned that the heat wasn't extreme. So they were basically not exactly, but they were closely made to how it is on Earth with good temperatures and good environment.
Yeah. So in conclusion, the study shows strong redox mineral organic patterns, which could possibly lead back to ancient life, possible alien life. However, both abiotic and biotic explanations can work. So it's not clear, as but one thing's for certain is that the unexplained findings mean we need to continue researching samples. So overall, it could be the strongest evidence for alien life on Mars yet. And these are our sources. That's it. Right? Yeah. Great.